Have people heard of this? Most haven't. Because I was looking up what, when in history, anywhere in the world, has a society collapsed, not necessarily due to the government, but because of big business corporations. And that's how I came across this, because the only ones in history was, well, there was really only two in history that had a total collapse, but it said we had one too in 1971 because of this Powell memo. So, and it was, and so let me first, the two in history, one was the British East India Company. This private company wielded immense power, acting like a sovereign nation with its own army. In India and China, it influenced or eroded local governments, leading to widespread social and economic disruption, such as during the Opium Wars in China. And then the Dutch East India Company, another example of a private business with quasi-governmental powers. It dominated trade and politics in parts of Asia, eventually collapsing due to internal corruption, excessive profit distribution, and market decline. And then the last one was this one. The late 20th century in the United States, some argue that by the late 1970s, large corporations in the U.S. gained outsized influence, undermining government reforms and shifting manufacturing abroad and weakening the domestic economy. Though this did not result in a total societal collapse, it did erode economic stability and government power. So, and if you want to understand, in short, business leaders felt threatened by the rise of social and civil rights movements in the 60s and early 70s. And in response, they organized to protect and expand their interests, most notably through the 1971 Powell Memo, which called for sustained political action by corporations to influence universities, media, courts, and politics. It caused union membership to shrink, regulatory and policies shifted, more pro-business than worker. It caused economic shocks such as the oil crisis and stagflation, weakened traditional manufacturing and labor sectors, further shifting power toward corporations in the financial sector. And then there were antitrust policy changes. Starting in the late 1970s, antitrust enforcement became more lenient, favoring mergers and allowing large corporations to grow even bigger and more powerful. That's what I've seen too. It's like, I mean, think about it. Anybody who's like middle class, you've had things happen at some job along the way, right? Where it's like, you know that you had a lawsuit, but you don't stand a chance again, because the corporations have infected all the agencies. They have. I said this like 5 years ago. I really kind of, I thought, is there any point to doing videos? Because when the corporations are more powerful than the government itself, then you know that it doesn't matter what government it is, they're going to go along with the corporations. They just are. It says here that the 1971 Powell memo, officially titled Attack on American Free Enterprise System, was a confidential memorandum written by Lewis F. Powell Jr. to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Powell argued that the American economic system was under broad attack. He went on to be a Supreme Court justice. And environmental groups, broad attack from consumer, labor, and environmental groups, and he urged the business community to organize a coordinated long-term campaign to defend and promote corporate interests. Powell called for businesses to invest in influencing public opinion, education, media, and the legal system, emphasizing the need for united action, careful planning, and large-scale financing through joint efforts. The memo became a blueprint for increased corporate lobbying, the creation of conservative think tanks, and a more aggressive role for business in American politics, contributing to a significant rise in corporate influence influence over government policies in the following decades. So, I mean, I'm a conservative, but I understand this part of liberals' arguments. I do, because they're right. They're right. But I think that the corporate has infected everything, even down to the unions, many of the unions. But so basically what happened, this guy wrote about it a little bit more. He said that in 1971, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce asked Lewis Powell, a corporate attorney who would go on to become a Supreme Court justice, to draft a memo on the state of the country. Powell's memo argued that the American economic system was under broad attack from consumer, labor, and environmental groups. In reality, these groups were doing nothing more than enforcing the implicit social contract that had emerged at the end of the Second World War. They wanted to ensure corporations were responsive to all their stakeholders, workers, consumers, and the environment, not just their shareholders. But Powell and the Chamber saw it differently. In his memo, Powell urged businesses to mobilize for political combat and stressed that the critical ingredients for success were joint organizing and funding. The Chamber distributed the memo, leading to CEOs, large businesses, and trade associations hoping to persuade them that big business could dominate American politics in ways not seen since the Gilded Age. It worked. The Chamber's call for a business crusade birthed a new corporate political industry practically overnight. Tens and thousands of corporate lobbyists and political operatives descended on Washington and state capitals across the country. I should know, I saw it happen with my own eyes. In 1976, I worked at the Federal Trade Commission. Jimmy Carter had appointed consumer advocates to battle big corporations that had for years had been diluting or injuring consumers. Yet almost everything we initiated at the FTC was met by unexpectedly fierce political resistance from Congress. At one point, when we began examining advertising directed at children, Congress stopped funding the agency altogether, shutting it down for weeks. I was dumbfounded. What happened? In 3 words, the Powell Memo. Lobbyists and their allies in Congress, and eventually the Reagan administration, worked to defang agencies like the FTC and to staff them with officials who would overlook corporate misbehavior. And it goes on. And you can say, oh, that's just the liberal. No, I've seen that too. There's more corporate it's not. That's why I said this years ago. I'm like, I don't know that it matters who you vote for. I mean, maybe in some ways, because ultimately when the corporations in America, and we've had a bunch leave, so I mean, Trump's been trying to get them back. But this is why I said recently, I'm like, we need to, like, the people need to start demanding that, you need to be able to honor our values. I mean, I can understand maybe they had, back in the 60s, they had all these different groups that were trying to agitate. But at the same time, then corporate went to that side too. And they've been very unfair, most especially to workers. I mean, and I can only speak about healthcare, but it definitely is just unbelievably ridiculous. And it's a complete moral decay. So, even though everyone thinks it's great, all these businesses come back here and America just gets wealthy, it's like it can't just be about that. It can't. I mean, it has to go back to being about what our founders wrote. The Constitution was not written just for free enterprise, okay? It was written for the American people, those that are the littlest too. That's who was supposed to be the boss. So even though it's great that businesses and manufacturing will come back here, we need to have standards again, because honestly, even though I've always voted conservative, this is one area I've seen it with my own eyes. Corporate wields way too much power, and they most certainly shouldn't be given the right of being a personhood like the rest of us, and they are in court, which is why you can never win against them, which then makes them unstoppable, and they do whatever they want to you, even if you get hurt. They don't care. And then it even makes them more sicker. So we have to have standards again.